What was the lowest, worst moment of your entire life so far? Do you think God had something to do with it? And if so, what and why and how? How is God present in those situations? That's what we're talking about this week. Kindred UMC live show features adults discussing adult topics, occasionally with adult language. It may not be suitable for young viewers. Please use discretion before watching.
Hello all. Welcome once again to the Kindred UMC pre-recorded live show, coming to you not live but pre-recorded from my front room, aka Kindred Studio A. My name is Chris Hayden. I am the pastor of Kindred UMC.
My name is Ryan. I am not a pastor of UMC, but I'm here.
My name's Brandon. I am the trustees chair and the queer sex positive fun friend.
Yeah. I can't remember what you said when we were doing sex and stuff, which we had to take several of those videos down because the bishop is a prude. I hope he doesn't see this. He probably wouldn't like me saying that either.
Still here.
Not because of you, by the way. Not because of you, but because of me.
I need to work harder then.
It was my fault. It was me. I was some of the language that I used in particular.
For the record, I wasn't saying what to you being like queer and positive. I know both those things about you.
Oh, yeah.
It was more the what that you had, like,
do you want to? Do you need to switch places, Ryan?
Right?
Entirely.
Oh yeah, it's been a well-established thing. When I come on the live show, they brought me on for sex, and I was like, well, I guess I must be the pre-described.
The token.
Hey, wait a minute. We brought you on because you had already described yourself as like queer sex positive.
It's like, put me on, coach.
Yeah, right. Yeah. We didn't bring you on and be like, hey, you need to be
Do this now or fired.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
Oh yeah. Because
The thing you want to just do more of it for this episode.
Yeah. Maybe if I remember to do it, hopefully go look up there and you can see whatever's left of that series that got decimated by the higher authorities. It was a good series, and by the way, the videos we had to take down had some of the most views we'd ever had.
I bet.
So
they were good.
Anywho, we are in the middle of the book of Jonah, and it's one of my favorite books of the Bible. And we are going to pick it up at chapter 2, which is basically a poem and a song. I'm going to include the last verse of the previous chapter, chapter 1, just because I don't know if you knew this, but why is that light blinking? And we're back. We had a problem with the camera, so we were talking about, we're in Jonah chapter 2. So this is part of a series. If I can remember to put it up there, you can go look at our Sex and Stuff series, and you can go look at the rest of our Jonah series. We've already done, we split chapter 1 into 2 parts. So, first of all, does anybody know what happens in Jonah chapter 1?
It begins.
It does begin.
I don't remember it, and I kind of wish I had reread it because it's a good one.
Yeah, so first of all...
And it's not that long.
Yeah, no, it's only 4 chapters.
Easy read.
Yeah, it's easy read. And it's like a bedtime story. So, like, important context. It's a satire. It's supposed to be funny. It opens with the biblical equivalent of Once Upon a Time. Mm-hmm. And the word of the Lord comes to Jonah. Go to your enemy and tell them what I tell you. Mm-hmm. And he goes the exact opposite direction.
Bump that.
Yeah, he goes.
I know what I want, Dad.
Yeah, the name of the city is Nineveh, and it's the Assyrian. It's a big Assyrian city, and Assyria essentially had just decimated Israel and Jerusalem, and so the idea that a Hebrew prophet would be called to Nineveh was kind of a wild idea. And most prophets, the word of the Lord comes to the prophet. The prophet does what they are called to do. The Lord says, I'm going to destroy this city. And the prophet says, no, please have mercy. And then the city usually arrests and beats and outcasts the prophet. It never works out well for the prophet. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
So this is a satire because the word of the Lord comes to Jonah, go to Nineveh, and he's like, nope. And he goes in the exact opposite direction.
I saw what happened to Elijah.
I'm not following in those footsteps. That's a bad idea, God.
So are we starting out viewing Jonah as a story, or like this is a thing that happened, whether or not with I don't want to say embellishments, but
You're talking about literalism?
yeah.
I do not believe that this happened. I do not believe that we should read this story literally. If you disagree with me, fair enough. People can't live in a fish for 3 days. So, do your thing.
That's exactly why I was thinking about, because I know that sometimes in...
Also, there's literal, the way they describe Nineveh is literally historically inaccurate. It's not real. This is not a real story. It's a bedtime story on purpose.
I was just going to mention that, I was wondering that on the way over here. I'm like, 3 days. How does oxygen work in the fish?
Yeah, so on
anatomically.
on my other channel, The Mad Pastor, I've gotten into discussions, let's say, in the comments section with people who insist that it is literal.
Yeah.
And I asked somebody to, quote me any credible source where a person has lived or can live inside of a fish or even a whale. I'll take a whale, even though they're not fish, for more than 24 hours. And somebody quoted me a story from the 18 something or other. And then I just did a quick Goog, literally a Google search, and that it was an article about that story and how it had been completely disproved. And dude, you can't live inside of a fish for more than I don't know, however long you can hold your breath. That's just the way it is. Sorry. This isn't supposed to be a literal story. It's supposed to be a bedtime story, and it's supposed to be funny. It is a satire. The word of the Lord comes to a prophet, and the prophet's like, no thanks. Goes the opposite direction. Then that prophet ends up on a ship fleeing from the presence of God, which is also kind of ironic for a prophet to do.
Right.
While he's on the ship, God throws a storm against the ship, and Jonah doesn't defend them like a prophet would do. A prophet would say, please, Lord, have mercy on these poor souls. And he doesn't do anything. He falls asleep in the hold of the ship. And then when they finally wake him up and they're like, pray to your God, who do you worship? And he's like, he reluctantly gives testimony. He says, I worship Yahweh. Basically what he says is, I worship Yahweh, the God who created everything, even your gods. And they're like, what the F? You pissed off that God? And
That's some
so,
work to do.
yeah. And so then Jonah says, you have to throw me into the ocean if you want. He doesn't pray. He never utters a word of prayer in this situation. And he says, you have to throw me in the ocean if you want this to stop. And even then, they won't. Eventually, they relent and they say a prayer. They're like, please don't hold us accountable for this. We're trying to please you. And they throw him in the ocean, and the storm stops. And then at the end of the story, despite Jonah's horrible profiting, despite his absolute reluctance and inability to do his job well, all of the sailors convert and they make vows and they make sacrifices to Yahweh. And he can't help but succeed, even though he's a terrible, horrible prophet.
I feel like that'd be the finest example of Jonah as the very first Jehovah's anti-witness. It's
Right.
It's we actually wanted you to show up to our door.
Yeah.
Where have you been?
Yes.
Now we are definitely committed to this.
And now all the Jehovah's Witnesses are like, I don't think we should go inside this house. Something's wrong here.
I've been waiting for you. Come in.
I've been expecting you. I have things prepared for you. It's I don't know. I don't like the look in this guy's eyes. Yeah, that's kind of you got the idea. It's a bit. The Book of Jonah is a bit.
And I'm trying to think of an equivalent modern day animated character that just is a total screw up, and yet everything seems to just fall in their favor.
Well, I think Mr. Magoo. It's an old reference.
Like that.
Shaggy and Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, they're cowards.
They're like, no way, man,
utterly
we're not
cowards.
going in that haunted house,
Yeah.
but we totally got this ghost here.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
That's a solid impression. by the way.
It's what he's not for.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Find me on Patreon. I'm kidding.
So we're at chapter 2 after Jonah has been thrown into the ocean, and I'm going to read the last verse of the first chapter because I think that's a better divide in the actual chapters. FYI, the writers of the Bible didn't put in numbers in their Gospels and in their books. That's something that came later. So It's just to make it navigable. That's all it is. So
Those cartographers and their maps.
let's do it this way. All right.
We can't go here in this part. This has a giant sea monster in it. We have to go around that part.
Yeah. Look out for the Leviathan. So Jonah, chapter 1, verses 17 through the rest of chapter 2. It sounds like this. And this is after Jonah's been thrown into the sea. But the Lord provided a large fish to swallow up Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from the belly of the fish, saying, I called to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. You cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the flood surrounded me. All your waves and your billows passed over me. Then I said, I am driven away from your sight. How shall I look again upon the holy temple? Upon your holy temple. The waters closed in over me, the deep surrounded me, weeds were wrapped around my head at the roots of the mountains. I went down to the land, whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit. Other translations say the grave, and it's capitalized. It's like a spiritual place. It's like hell, It's the land of the dead kind of thing. O Lord my God, as my life was ebbing away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you into your holy temple. Those who worship vain idols forsake their true loyalty. But I, with the voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you what I have vowed I will pay. Deliverance belongs to the Lord. Then the Lord spoke to the fish, and it spewed Jonah out upon the dry land. Bleh.
Bleh. I love that.
That's concerning. And we're back. So, much like Jonah, I feel like I'm in the belly of the whale, in the deepest, darkest hell that I can imagine.
Pastor Hayden?
It's been a rough weekend for me. So, a couple of things I would like to clarify. So, we understand that we live on a ball and that there's water on it, but if you go deep into the water, you're eventually going to reach the surface of the earth, essentially.
Right. The crust.
Yeah. People in the ancient world didn't understand that. They didn't believe that. They looked down at the water, they saw blue. They looked up in the sky, they saw blue. And so they believed that essentially we were like this, like the earth is flat and there's a firmament. There's a glass or whatever it's made of shield that prevents all the water up there from coming crashing down. And when it rains, it's like, oh, the firmament's leaking. Mm-hmm. And so, like ancient flood story, they believe like, oh, the firmament is like letting all the water in, and that's what's flooding the world. Like that's the kind of
our little bubble.
Yeah.
Pops.
Now, so if they're here, and you go into the water, you can go far enough down to like fall out the bottom. Mm-hmm. That's what they believed. Mm-hmm. And so there was a theme in the first video in this series about going down. So the word of the Lord comes to Jonah. He goes down to the city Joppa as he's fleeing. And then he gets on board a ship. That word in Hebrew, both of those, they're the same word, Yerad. He goes down to the city, he goes down to the ship, and then he goes down to the hold of the ship. So there's this, anytime there's three of something that's motif, like that's a literary.
Picturing like Emperor's New Groove style, like cartoons, just like down, down, down.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Like in the story.
Yeah, he's there's a descent as he flees from God. Mm-hmm. And now he's even further down in the water. And so like this is the downest you can down. That's what's going on.
According to local knowledge.
Yeah. And so there's references like Sheol, and then I pointed out the pit, capital P. He's not just worried about dying in the water. He's worried about falling out into the land of, he's worried about losing his soul.
Yeah. Into just like the pit of Hades under the ocean.
Exactly. Yes,
Davy
exactly.
Jones Walker.
So, and from the belly of the fish, he sings this song. He offers this psalm of praise. And it's of thanksgiving. God, I was in my lowest and God rescued me. And so I think that's the essence of this particular passage. So I've gathered you all fine gentlemen here to ask you the question, have you ever had a moment like that? Have you ever, or moments like that? Like what comes to mind when you think of kind of rock bottom experiences that have changed you?
Well, we have how long? Okay. So
Don't worry about the timer.
Yes.
I always go over.
okay.
And we've screwed up the timing so much anyway. Who knows?
So for my rock bottom, which as I've expounded upon, like in your like discipleship class and whatnot, that happened almost somewhere between like 3.5, 4 years ago or so. Just hearing you reread that like psalm of praise of like deliverance and whatnot, there are like lines and portions where I'm just feeling like just soul level sucker punching here and there sometimes. Yeah,
How so?
because I'm hearing things that talk about like, you know, being in like complete despair with like feeling like cast away and completely like alone and abandoned, but now like I'm gradually feeling myself picking back up. It's the point where this had all started. I'll just like say, just for brevity's sake, that it was an incident of my own doing that caused like the end of like a, you know, marriage, you know, a huge significant relationship, loss of my home, loss of friends, and also kind of like speaking to, we were talking a moment ago about like the questioning thing, like also like the safety of like me not being certain of like who I was, what I wanted in life in total. So it's like rug out from under the type of
like
thing too.
that's approaching Sheol, sinking deep
100%.
kind of stuff.
I about a month or two after the incident happened, I had a friend in the medical field talk to me, and they said like, because I described it, I said, you know, when an incident following that happens, like the point of like, you know, like separation, division, like this is, you know, screwed over basically, like never coming back together again. The way I would describe it is that like, and I don't say this like to just sound like, you know, flowery poetic, but it literally like I felt like something like in my heart chest cavity that I would equate to like my soul being torn like apart, being torn asunder. And there were multiple nights where I just wished, I'm like, God, there's no further purpose of me in life. I wish that you would just kill me, get it over with. Like if I go to sleep tonight, just don't let me wake up. Like whatever it is, I don't care how. If my car fails, whatever, just end my life. There's no further purpose. What are you waiting for?
Yeah, this is the definition of rock bottom.
Yeah. So it, after finding a lot of things that I didn't expect or anticipate, akin to, you know, Jonah's not exactly expecting, you know, big fish to show up. That's an important part of the story, facet of the story. He gets thrown in the ocean thinking that's it. He's resigned himself. Yeah.
And like, I can hear that in your story.
Yeah.
And what you're like, you had resigned yourself.
Yep. But through little like pockets of time where like I've gradually found the safety to talk to and open up to certain individuals over the past couple of years. Like my relationship with my dad is the best it's ever been because of being able to like open to him. And there's still, you know, wounds in that I'm, you know, not always comfortable with talking about, with sharing my story and experiences without necessarily sugarcoating. I mean, like in some cases, like I might, for the sake of, you know, I don't want to like trauma dump. On someone.
Self-disclosure is an important skill to understand.
But finding that like 90 80 to 90% of the people that I have told and share my story to, I've ended up having a better connection and friendship with as a result, which I never considered that to be a possibility. I now find myself more connected back into like a faith-based environment than I had before with Kindred and also, another church that I go to. But multiple things have come out of that genuinely would not have happened if I hadn't gone through like the, absolute like pit depths whatsoever. Because like, when you spend on average like an hour each day, 30 to 60 minutes each day, like grieving to the point of exhaustion that you just go to sleep on the floor because you're like, I don't have energy to get up even.
I identify with that experience.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is just a huge contrast. But in that moment though, there is literally like no hope. There's no life ahead. Like you just feel like the timeline is just going to stop. Like the good, the great has already happened. Life couldn't possibly have gotten any better than it was before. What could possibly? And that I've discovered speaks more to a lack of my imagination than, God's ability or inability to do something.
Yeah, man. We should have had you go last.
So, yes.
I can't compete with that story. Yeah, I think what you're describing is that is the Jonah experience. Like you are articulating it, and I think it's why this story is so important in Scripture, because it's coming for all of us. Nobody doesn't have a worst moment of their life. You know what I mean? And not like we shouldn't. I strongly discourage us from comparing worst moments to other worst moments. That's not helpful. Whatever your worst moment is your worst moment, and that's what it is.
Yeah, in the environment that I work now, one of the things that we advise our patients is like no war stories.
Yeah.
We're basically saying, okay, well, you went through this. Well, I went through this, and it was for 5 years. You just had it for 1 year. I had this for 5 years, and it's like, no.
That's not actually helpful.
Yeah, we're inviting a person to healing based on what they feel. Just because something isn't hard for you now doesn't mean it's hard for them currently.
Right. Yeah. So first of all, thank you very much for sharing that, because I wasn't sure how vulnerable we were going to be willing to get.
Yeah, I figured abbreviated would be best.
Well, I appreciate it. I think that's you sharing that is helpful to whoever else is hearing that that may be facing something similar. I can share my. Would you? I don't want to cut you off, Brandon.
Go
do you have
for it?
Okay.
I live on the side of the like. I don't have a good horror story to share. I don't have a really hard rock bottom. When you asked about it, I was like, oh, the comparison bug bites. I'm like, my worst thing is much milder than many of my friends and
go ahead. What is your
But
worst
did it
thing?
matter to you?
It did. I learned so much. Like, it was
There
great.
you go. That's
Well, what is your word? Because I'm sure
And,
there's
like-
plenty of people out there who are kind of identify with
Yeah,
that too. It's like, I don't have some like life-ending
Nothing
kind
was
of
where like I lost everything. I
Yeah.
had nowhere else to turn. Like I've been in places where I have really good support systems. I was able to ask for help. I was able to like navigate through it, or like
I think
Yeah.
that's also very, very valuable.
Yeah.
So please, like,
No, like the thing that I came up with that I thought would be most relevant is when I was working for YouthWorks, as I was a site leader for a mission trip. So I would like in charge of the building, and I had a team of like 3 people. High schoolers, middle schoolers would come in. We'd give them jobs to do around town with local nonprofits, feed them, house them, the whole like living in a place for a week. And I was just like in way over my head with that. And so after the first like month or two, I was drowning in paperwork. I was not being successful at my job. Like our finances were looking kind of wonky. And I was like, I don't know where the money has gone. We were down like $90 one day. And I was like, how did we lose like nearly $100? Like this is the church. We cannot just be like, where did it go? That's no one wants to ask where it went. Like it's not. And so just like having a hard time with my team and managing them and building relationships, because I was still like not quite comfortable being out of the closet in my church leadership role. So I was like, what if we just didn't talk about it? And that goes well all the time.
You didn't feel comfortable being gay in the church?
And like being in charge of people.
You might be like the first person
Like-
that's ever had that experience.
So I was just like, I was weird and cagey, and it set off a bad experience for my team. It's like, it didn't go well. There was one night where I had like, it was just a weird night. I don't know. It was weird. And just like me and my teammate were like clashing. It's just like, I don't know, we were just like, all right, pause. Like, this is really like spiraled out of control. Stop, reset. Like, hi, I'm Brandon. Let's reintroduce and start over, because otherwise we're going to have issues. And so just like, I learned a lot from that. And like, it got better. My summer was great. I learned a lot. It was really hard. It was really tough. As is like a sleep deprived, overworked mission trip experience. going
Probably
on for
carb
3
heavy
months.
meals, I imagine.
I don't know. Who knows what we ate? Oh my goodness.
So wait, how old were you roughly at the time?
22.
So yeah, so you're, just in your early 20s. You haven't even made it out of college yet, and you're being asked to organize.
Only just made it into UCF after finishing state school.
And you're having to like manage all this for
Yeah.
middle and high schoolers
Yeah, I was in
while
charge.
navigating your.
I was in
own self.
charge of the adult leaders and like running their meeting.
What?
The John Mulaney bit where he talks about, I was 7, my babysitter was 13. That's like asking a horse to watch a dog.
Yeah.
She could dial the phone a little faster than me.
Right? So,
That's a
like,
lot. I feel like that'd be a lot of responsibility because
Yeah.
when I was at that age, at best I was like one person helping to run like a candy store, and if anyone had any complex question, I'm like, I gotta call the manager for this.
Yeah. And so like my boss above me we had like our like halfway debriefing employee review, and they were like, you're not doing well, and we're gonna put you in
You're telling me.
we're gonna put you into like this program of like more support and check-ins and more things. Like, that's great. I don't feel in trouble. I feel supported. Like, this is what I needed.
Yeah.
Obviously, everyone wins here. She was super upset, and I was like, oh, thank God. I need more help. I'm not doing good. And like at the end of it, they had questions about our finances. Like, I hadn't done super great. And so at the end of our meeting, when they brought everyone back together, like, we had a separate little meeting for our team, and my team had no idea like what was wrong, because I had just like kept it from them. And that's where I learned the value of telling the truth.
I like that your story is also like a children's story.
Yeah, it was,
and that's where I learned the value of telling the truth.
Oh, if I had told,
that finale felt very VeggieTales like. And I'm,
Yes.
like, I'm sitting here, I'm like, oh,
like, it was stressful. I learned a lot. Like, everyone's fine. We had a great time. Like a very interesting summer. I wish I had done things differently. I had a lot of regret. But that was where, like, oh, here's perspective. Like, I'm not doing great, and I wasn't able to ask for help. I didn't know what to do. I was in over my head. Like, wasn't sure how to handle it.
Yeah, there's something about
And then I got
having
scared and like freaked out more. Instead of like doubling down and being honest, I did the wrong thing and went the other direction. That's what I have to offer for the story.
I really think there's something about because we can look back on these things, and I often do in the middle of the night when I wake up at like 4 a.m. and you start replaying all the things you've done
I held on to
poorly in
this
your
for
life, you know?
years.
Yeah. And it's very easy to be hard on ourselves. I think most people lean towards the let's be like I'm a piece of garbage. I don't deserve love. Most people lean in that direction.
Yeah.
And I think your story is incredibly helpful because it is a hey man, you're just doing the best you could. You needed the support, and when it came, you were relieved. Like, even if it came in the form of like discipline,
Right.
it was still like, yeah, but I need help.
Yeah, like this
you
makes
know?
absolute sense.
Right.
Yeah.
We're running very low on time, so I'll just be brief. I've told the story many times, so please go look at our other videos. But for me, again, breakup. Like I was cheated on in my first marriage, and that was in large part my fault too. Like I participated in the dynamic that created that, you know, and I had the opportunity in that breakup to, in the church, you know, divorce is frowned upon, you know.
Yeah.
And being cheated on kind of gives me an out, you know, like, what, hey man, I was committed, I was in, I could, you know, and I remember in the darkest place being like, what, and this is total grace from God, because I'm not this wise actually, but like I remember the feeling of like, no, what do you own in this? What do I own in this relationship that created this environment, that created this dynamic, that contributed to what's happened here? And it wasn't fun, and it hurt a lot, and it sucked a lot. But that was some of the strongest growth personally for me. It in a weird way, that experience gave me finally permission to really be myself and to really accept who I really am, and to look for someone not who was going to complete me, but someone who actually could partner with me as I am, gifts and flaws all together. And it was one of the greatest, most important lessons I've ever learned and ever experienced. And it in a large way has defined not only my current marriage that I'm very happy with, but also just my like enjoyment of life, my genuine ability to appreciate and feel gratitude and like participate in the experience that God's given me that called life.
Yeah, it's that exact way that you've ended it right there. This past month, I don't know, I feel like end of December, like something clicked in my brain where I'm like, I think I'm gonna start like liking myself for once.
Yeah.
And I'm just in, and the other half of
I'm
me,
also very glad to hear you say that.
the other part of my brain is like, where the hell was this like years ago? Like,
yeah, right.
like glad
Why did it have to hurt so long?
Yeah.
To
You
suddenly just one
choose?
day kind of like
yeah.
click.
It's like, glad you showed up finally.
Yeah.
I appreciate
Welcome
that.
to the party.
So like the past month, I've had these like things where I feel like I'm actually stepping into a state of like genuinely liking myself, regardless of other people's perception, which is major, because that was a massive flaw that led to quote unquote my undoing from 3-4 years ago. And just noticing the patterns that I had that would lead to like toxic beliefs about myself and behaviors on the external. This year, one of my, my resolution for myself is that once a month, I do one thing that's totally new that I've never done before, but I also have to do it alone.
Yeah.
So,
Gosh. We can talk more after like
but my point of
the
adding that
alone
is
thing is and that really clicks with me.
but that my reason for saying that is that I would not have reached that point now if I was still in what I was 3-4 years ago. I would have still been incredibly codependent, fully, craving and wanting validation on an external source 100%. And if I didn't get it from whatever source I wanted at the time, I would try to find however I could from anyone else, but could not cultivate that in myself.
Yeah, man, I'm really glad to hear you. Like, I think you're right on the right track too. Like, it's good to hear you say that. So I hope you're paying attention out there, whoever's listening and watching. Like, this is real stuff. You cannot survive life without experiencing some rock bottom. Rug gets pulled out from under you. Life gets turned upside down. Don't compare those experiences to other people's experiences like that. Your experience is your experience. And the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. And that's like, don't like demean that. Don't slough that off. It's real. And also hear the message from Jonah. Hear the message from real people's lives. God is in that. Hope abounds. It gets better. Grace is real. There is a Holy Spirit that is actually knitting things together, that's bringing the kingdom of heaven ever more present into our lives. You can participate with it. You can cooperate with it. You can have hope in your darkest moments. That is the message of Jonah chapter 2. So, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen. Did I cut you off?
I have one more thing.
Go for it.
I'm so curious.
I'll edit it.
All right, because you said in setting us up for this tonight, like, what's a rock bottom experience that changed your perspective? How you define rock bottom matters so much. Because I would be someone that says, I do not deserve grace and I am not looking for help because it wasn't that dark. It wasn't that bad. But like finding something that's like changed your perspective, I was like, okay, great. Like I like hit something that I needed to look around at the problem in a different way. And this makes me worthy of like seeking help.
Yes. The I don't deserve it thing.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't that bad, as many of my friends
Yes.
and family have experienced. Like, how you define that?
Yeah,
really,
you
really
cannot
matters.
compare your worst thing to other people's worst things, especially if you live in the United States.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
We are abundantly privileged and protected and wealthy. Even the poorest among us are wealthier than the poorest among the world.
but like
So-
your hurt still,
But it's still
deserves healing.
yeah. But
no matter if it's rock bottom. Or
yeah,
not.
somebody who's going through something bad is still going through something bad. That's the way it is. Yeah.
It echoes something that I've also heard or been taught before, of the idea that like, okay, maybe we didn't have the same experience, but we've had the same feelings.
Same feeling. Yeah,
Like
like
if we've gone through the same
Yes.
feelings of
That
like,
hurt the same
of like
way.
major
Yeah.
like deep
Yeah.
loss that like guts you, or like I had a whole bunch of trust and hope in this one thing, and then my dream was dashed upon the rocks. Like
Right.
we can at least equate that type of feeling rather than being like the minute details of like, well, okay, well I grew up here and you grew up
Yeah.
there, so like, bleh on that.
Yeah, it's a cliche, but it really does. It is absolutely true. Context really, really matters.
Yeah.
And I love the way you put it. It doesn't have to, we can't like compare the literal situations. The feelings are the same. We feel when you lose everything, whatever your kind of conception of like losing everything is, it still feels like you lost everything, and to compare your grief to other people's grief, it's really not helpful. And if somebody tries to force you into that, I would say like, man, just take a step back from that. And if you're doing it to yourself, please give yourself permission to really truly feel the loss of what you're feeling, because I promise you, God is in the middle of that. I promise you, grace is present. Hope is in there. You can experience this and find like transformation and a good thing after it. It really is there. So yeah, I already did the blessing. So, amen.